I'm not the expert in any of these models, but I have read a lot and studied as much as possible. And we continue to get new data. So it's going to be not a one and done type thing, but our primary requirements as agents is primarily what we're going over. And that should take all of about 5-10 minutes. And the rest will be then discussions and diving a little deeper into things that we can help our clients so that they understand this more. So I almost hit leave meeting when it asked me if I could record. I'm going to share my screen here. Make sure I get the right one. Okay, can you guys see my screen there?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we're talking sea level rise in Hawaii. We'll talk about some models that are models across the US, but most of what we're looking at is strictly Hawaii. And, you know, this law applies to all islands, though I will note some of the differences. Like I said, the first few minutes is what you must know, what you must do, and how just the bare bones requirements. I do want to spend a little bit of time on transition issues, like if you're in escrow and as a 5-1 when the law takes effect, but we are just getting the new seller's disclosure out. Then we'll go into a little bit more depth on the big why. What is the sea level rise about? What do we know? What do we not know? And detail, and then do a deep dive into the site so that you know how to present information to your clients. And then kind of some frequently asked questions that clients may have and that you can help them with. But that's a short list, and I'm sure it'll get longer. So that's where we anticipate a lot of interactive discussion. So, excuse me. So the sea level rise, disclosing that on the seller's disclosure is a law as of 5/1, May 1st, 2022. I'll just real quick now go out to the Sea Level Rise Hawaii site, which you can find. It's in Maui, it's on our MLS homepage site. And you can always just search Sea Level Rise Hawaii, and you should be able to find it. So I'm going to go out there now. Oh, I'm already zoomed. Let me, okay. So when you come in, come into the site, sorry. This is what it looks like. And I think most of us on Maui might recognize where that first picture is located. But you come in, and the first thing you see is a little at the interactive mapping tool. So if you're representing a seller, you can advise them to go out to this site and pull this information, or you could get the information and provide to them as a PDF. And I'll show you quickly how to do that. But we first want to zoom in And you can do that by just typing in an address, and it will zoom right to it. You can say, okay, I want to go in here. I have personally found that I like zooming in a lot more than they zoom in, because at least here, this is actually Ma'alaya Serapha condo that was totally flooded out in our January storm. And I use that because I had clients looking to buy there, and that's a plug if you know they still want to buy there despite everything. But you can zoom way in here and so you actually see buildings, but I like going out and actually looking at the satellite mode, which to me is just a lot more intuitive. And you can see, have a lot of where you can actually detail in to what's going on. Then the official law is that we use this sea level rise exposure area. That is a aggregate of several different models, but the law, the requirement is to state whether you are in this highest level, the 3.2 foot, and we'll talk later about why they came up with that area. And it's a yes or no question. What do you have? Are you in it or not? So what do you think the answer on this one is?
Oh my God, yes.
Yep. So you can turn down the opacity if you want to see more, which is really nice. So that's the quick 5-minute version. I'm going to go back to the presentation here and look at what is in the new seller's disclosure. So I just grabbed the changes, but this new forms should be in starting 5.1 in zip form. So right at the top, which is the area that's information obtained from public records and may be completed by the listing broker, are two changes. Before we just had flood zone, and now they've added the designation of the flood zone. So is it in the V zone or the X zone or whatever? And then the sea level rise exposure area, yes or no. So that is information that the agent can fill out. It's considered public data. It's not really, it's just to guide the seller's disclosure. Then down in the seller's disclosure, item 12, they expanded they clarified changes to the special flood area zone. It used to be defined by FEMA's firm maps to now be the National Flood Insurance Program it's actually the same thing, I think. I'm not an insurance expert, but it's FEMA, it's National Flood Insurance Program, but they spelled it out. So, and then they added this line down here, line 13, aren't we all lucky? Does the property lie in the sea level rise exposure area designated by the Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission? And those are the only changes to the seller's disclosure form. So let's look a little bit about transition. So, are you in transition? Are you not? What needs to be done? If you are in escrow, buyer or seller side on May 1st, or even today, I know many people that have addressed this already, but as of 5.1, the law to disclose is in place. That makes the seller liable if they don't disclose. And if the seller has already completed the seller's disclosure on the old forms, then it's considered a transition. Now, I talked to Michelle. She said no amendments required for properties that are obviously not impacted. So that's at least a easy way if you're upcountry or something. So go out to the site, and even if the property is in the exposure area or even close, then get the seller to amend the SRPDS as soon as possible. Teresa, you had a question?
Yeah, I do, but I was gonna go look so back to if we're in escrow. They've already done the seller's disclosures,
right?
But of course, we're not closing until like the 20th. Technically, yeah, I'm gonna go look, but I don't think they're in the zone.
Right.
Do I still have to ask the seller to disclose?
Not if they're obviously out of the zone. If they're kind of close, I would add it just to make sure that are you representing the buyer or the seller?
The buyer.
Well, in that case, I would share the information with your buyer, but I wouldn't go and ask the listing agent to provide it.
Okay.
Unless it is in the zone. So yeah, Karen.
I've got a question about the 3.2 feet. So there are a number, and I probably know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Like there's a number of complexes that are long enough across, the front of the ocean frontage that if you're in the front of the building, yes, you are 3.2 feet. If you're more towards the back of the complex, you're not. So how does that affect?
I believe, and that's a great question actually, but I believe you should disclose it if any of the association buildings are in that zone.
I kind of assume, because either way it's going to cost the people money if it rises towards the front of it. So.
That's exactly true. I mean, you can provide them the data saying, your building's not at risk or whatever, or, where you're at. But the reality is it may cost them and maybe issues. So the reason we want to do this transition revision is because that kicks in an amended revision and you don't want to delay closing. So, which I think can be up to like 12 days delays. So look at your contracts and your timelines now and take action. Okay. So now that's the just intro part. Now we're going to go a little bit further into the big why. Why was 3.2 feet determined? And that is what, several of the models they looked at, and the criteria was, well, what could be the highest, and this was back in 2017, the sea level rise height, the maximum that we see could happen by the year 2100. That's how they established that 3.2 feet. So this little chart here is all of these are based on different emissions models, the greenhouse gases emissions. And you can see the different models have different values and numbers, and only that one, which is shown in orange, is at its highest threshold is hitting 3.2 feet by 2100. Okay, so that's how they established that level. Since this was originally established, though, there's been a lot of other data that's come in, and which really says, you know, this may get much worse. And one of the most recent things that has come out is about the icebergs in Antarctica and Greenland, you know, going into the ocean and causing sea level rise. And some of those models project that by 2050, we may, not we Hawaii, we the world, may see up to an 8-foot rise in sea levels. So what is the answer? You know, it's a wide variation, and it's because we don't know. I think we should all be, you know, careful about making choices to mitigate greenhouse gases and things, but it's a worldwide thing. Even if we're running things perfectly, we're still going to be impacted by sea level rise. And we are not alone in this. It's, even though we're an island, it's island nation, it seems a little worse, but we do have a lot of much higher level areas for people to live. And historically, the Hawaiians had. They didn't live in the coastal areas. So, and I highlighted a lot of details in my notes, so take a look at that. But, you know, it could potentially get much worse, and it will continue, our knowledge will continue to change. So
I've got a question.
Yep.
Because some properties are like direct beachfront or low lying. Some are up above a cliff. And I think I know the answer to this too, but I would assume even if it's within 3.2 feet of the water, if it's above it, does that still count?
Well, Karen, I've studied some maps in some different areas and looked at places I know very well. And like some of them that were shown in the 3.2 level area are a good 20 feet up from the coast. So I don't quite understand how they've established that. You know, and it's a rock there. It's not like, but they say, you know, just as the shoreline hits, maybe things will collapse, and maybe they know something I don't know. So that's a good question. We don't know.
Okay.
What?
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So back in 2017, they released a report that came out on the vulnerability in Hawaii. They incorporated all these different models. I think most of the data was at least originally published on the site that we've been advised to use at that point. At that time, they estimated that about 20,000 residents would be displaced and about 28 miles of coastline would become impassable, which is, even if your property may not be in a sea level rise area, they may not have road access. So you want to make sure to look for that also. 2018, the State Climate Commission recommended that some legislation be put in place. But the 2020, the Hawaiʻi Association of Realtors proactively adopted the climate change and natural hazards in their disclosure section of the purchase contract. So that's already in our purchase contract. In 2021, Act 179, which is the law that we're talking about, was enacted that requires mandatory seller disclosure in real estate transactions. And that actually didn't take effect until May 1st, 2022. So, so just to talk a little bit about some of the details, and these may change over time. I said the 3.2 that's defined is an aggregate of 3 different modeling functions looking at 3 different things. Okay, so the first one is passive flooding. So high tide flooding in still water that can occur. Then the second is annual high wave flooding, and we'll go and see some more detail a little bit on that, but that is obviously when you have the high waves. And then 3 is coastal erosion, where due to the sea level rising, the coast will actually erode and disappear. So different areas, and it's probably based on the type of the surrounding land as well as the ocean floor makes a difference, especially in the coastal erosion, on what the total outcome will be. But this is just a model, but that exposure area is those 3 things put together and may actually be in general bigger than the sum of their parts, or more extensive. Before we dive into it, I do want to note these are models, they're scientific models that have been all peer reviewed and evaluated, but there's always assumptions and limitations, and there's just not a lot of certainty in any of this. And this language comes right out of that website page, so you might want to point that out to your clients, as well as the risks associated with the use or non-use of the results are assumed by the user. So, and then it's really important to note what these models don't cover. They don't cover the impacts from less frequent high wave activities, the 1 in 10 year storm event, storm surge, or tsunami, all of which can impact our low-lying areas. I just was given a report the other day, just released February of 2022, that they said, well, we had defined this 1 in 10 year wave of, storm event. But what we are seeing now is those storm events are coming much more frequently. Your 1 in 10 year events are now once every 2 years, or they predict they'll be once every 2 years by 2050. So keep that in mind. And none of these really talk about that.
Kathleen, I have a question in line with that.
Yep.
Because a lot of this damage out of the last storm was more due to flooding from upcountry than it was from actual, wave surges or anything.
Yep.
Coldwell Banker has a phenomenal buyer disclosure thing that lists any possible thing that can happen. Could we create one for our company that we can use that And they are very smart in the fact, because they used to make the seller sign it. Now it's a buyer's only signature,
Right.
so that it doesn't hold up a deal. But it would be very helpful to get our CYA under one of those if we could help create one of those for the company.
Okay, I will bring that up with Michelle and the brokers.
We do have a Big Island disclosure over here that we could add.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know Big Island has separate disclosures
Uh-huh.
and they have something on that.
Yeah, we have a little bit on that. We'll take a look at it and see if we need to add more.
Right, okay, okay. And there is missing data, so the islands of Lānaʻi, Molokaʻi, and Hawaiʻi only have the passive flooding hazard map done. They don't have the other two hazards. And it's just lack of historical data. Don't know if they're trying to get more data or what on those. So, but, and the passive flooding in general, when you look at the maps, is the lowest common denominator. Okay. So before I
What
go
is
to
passive flooding? What does that mean? What is passive flooding?
passive flooding means high tide floods that tend to happen,
Okay.
not high wave or high wave and high tide together, but just high tide. So, so now we're going to go back out to the site and kind of go into a little more detail on, just so you know how to use the site, and it can look at the additional detail. Before, most of the interactive, all of the interactive stuff is in this mapping tool at the top. But before we go there, I just want to run through what is on this site. Is that all the different organizations that have contributed to this, all the disclaimers and disclosures, good, you know, overview of, in a really brief thing, what this is about. Most of this I've talked about. Then description on sea level rise projections and the models that they used. So you can see one of the models there I had in my slides, another that NOAA did. This one in the thing is actually from satellite altimeter movements over 27 years, where they're seeing more variation happening. Then you see the exposure in that same slide I talked about. And then each of those areas is defined. So passive flooding, and you know, I like that they actually show, you know, what how our water tables work, and that our water table in general will rise too, which is the annual high wave flooding, what that means, and how, you know, we're going from a mean high wave here to a higher one, and what impact that will have on the land. And then the coastal erosion. And this one is where they give a good indication that it often will be different based on what is the structure of both the land and the sea level near that area. Okay. So those are the three primary things they have, but in addition, they have potential economic loss, vulnerability, And that's not super granular, but it shows clearly when we have our condos on the beach that they're in the orange zone. Flooded highways, there's one, and I talked about that, so you can look and see which highways are at risk. NOAA has its passive flooding model, which they have community plan areas for the different community planning districts. Moku boundaries, Aupua'a boundaries, interesting. Here's your flood hazard zones. Really easy to see in the different insurance zones, and I'll show you that. The coastal flood hazard zone with, sea level rise. Oh, that has different variations, and I don't know much about this one at all. Your beaches and sand is defined by the USDA. Just the basic geology that shows what the rock structure of different areas are and what the land is like. State land use districts, when we have to fill out what's your state land use district, that gives you information. Goes down into your TMK parcels, as detailed as they can get. And that stuff's all out there in this one site. So we'll go back up here. Any questions?
It's a lot to take in.
It is, and wait till you start getting into this stuff. You can really, it's great they've put this site together, but it is very, very scary. So in a lot of ways. So I'm gonna collapse this. This little menu items always stays there. I wanna, you can expand and collapse a lot of things. You can zoom in, zoom out, go to your different areas, but also keep your eye down in the lower left-hand corner here, as they pop up things like the flood zones and things that are very interesting to see. And this opacity is always down here, so you can adjust that. Okay, so here, let's go back and reduce our sea level rise exposure area. And maybe, your client says, I'm not gonna own this thing this long, so I don't care. I just want to make sure I don't lose value in my property. So they may find more interest in these lower details. So let's see. So here's your passive flooding. So I'm just going to turn this aggregate off. And if you go to the 3.2 foot passive flooding, your conclusion on this same property probably is like, oh, well, I can handle that. Right? You guys see that?
Looks that way.
That's really the
What are
only
you
one we
talking
have.
about?
That's the passive flooding area. And some areas are quite different. That's all that. And this is the one that's on all the islands, where the
But
other.
does it go up into that river or whatever it is, the little stream there too?
It does. Yep, you're right, actually, Karen. Which is what?
Lānaʻi. I don't know. It kind of looks like it.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
this
no.
is Ma'alaya Surf and I forgot Kihei something is right here. But
That's
just
what nailed it. Okay.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry, I'll shut up. Okay, go ahead.
You're exactly right, Karen, that down this stream came everything from upcountry. I mean, we had some rain here in Kihei. But when this came in, the bridge right here, which is a fairly new bridge, but obviously hadn't thought about that amount of water coming down, but it backed up and this whole area was totally flooded out. And it took them 7 days to get the road open and even longer. And Ma'alaya Surf is still not open.
My friend works for the county. He goes to church with me, and he told me a long, drawn-out story about how they had to rush in there and they could barely even drive. Their car was practically floating. There were trees attacking them, you know what I mean? Rushing at them. It was pretty intense.
Yeah, no, and it was a very dangerous situation. And parts of Kihei Road had actually collapsed into the ocean down here. So yeah, it was, and that had.
Suda's store is still closed. It got that drenched. I mean, it just flooded that whole little area there too.
Right. Yep. So anyway, going on, so let's turn off passive flooding and look at the annual high wave flooding. Well, that looks a little more serious. Annual high wave flooding, but if you drop it back, it's going to be okay for a little while, it looks like. So let's turn that one off. And you can have these all on, but they start making it really hard to read. This one is actually lines, so you can select all, or you can just select worst case. So this is coastal erosion. So where they're predicting, based on what they know, the coastline could actually move to. And probably the scariest one of them all in many cases.
When is this supposed to occur?
So that's, the models have by 2100. Some of the scientists say, based on what we've been seeing in the measurements, it could happen as soon as 2050. So, but you can provide this level of detail and evaluate it accordingly. Like I said, we're all going to be helping our clients look at risk mitigation. So, the economic loss, that's, like I said, less granularity, but you can see, that they are estimating some loss of economic issues. Clearly, where you've got big condo buildings at risk, that's significant. I'm sure if you went into Kahului, it almost scares me to think what the impacts are over there, and I haven't looked at the maps. What happens if our airport floods out? So flooded highways, this one's really interesting here. No surprise, Kihei Road, it floods all the time here. But look out here at North Kihei Road. The whole thing. And if I put on the 3.2, that whole thing is potentially underwater. So North Kihei Road might have to become a bridge. And that's why I said, no matter where you're at, look at the surrounding roads that are low lying, as that may have an impact. Okay. Going down into some of the other overlays. Wait, I still have the roads on. The passive flooding NOAA, that one, I'm still trying to interpret it exactly what it's saying, but they over here they talk about the different colors, so your low-lying areas and your water depth changes. Community plan areas, it's kind of nice to show. I think that when you have to zoom out. So yeah, this whole area is the Kihei Makena community plan. And there's people responsible for each community plan trying to look at the future and what's happening. So your Moku and Aupua'a boundaries, just your flood hazard zones. So that's what your FEMA's flood zones are. And like I said, it's good map to put you there, you know, so you know exactly where it is. I still go out to the flood site to collect the official report, but that off. Coastal flood hazard with sea level rise. It's a different model. Again, details of what it encompasses, I'm not sure. Beaches and sand defined by the USDA. So you can see some buildings are actually, you know, on the sand, and what impacts does that in itself have? Interesting. Oh, sorry. Collect. It shuts these off. So this is the geology one, where you can see, looking over here again, your beach deposits, your dunes, your reef. You know, if you zoom out, you can, you know, see all the different types of land that we have in our islands. And from when I took Master Gardener class, our Maui anyway, and I'm sure if you looked at the other islands, has 17 of the 22 different soil types that are found in the world. So we have a good variety. Let's see. And look at
what soils did you say?
Yeah, soil types.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So this is the land use district. So when you're saying, are you urban, rural, agricultural, that shows that. It's a nice. And you can go into details on your TMKs just by flipping the switch. So that's our zoom into the world, and I encourage you guys to go out there. Most people are probably already out searching their properties and or their own homes or whatever. So let's go back to the presentation, and I brought that up accidentally. And just look at seller and what our different questions by our buyers and sellers are going to be. It's obviously a lot of data and things that many people won't understand, some people don't believe in, and things. the disclosure is mandatory per that law. And you know, what happens if a seller says, I don't believe in global warming, I refuse to sign this? Well, they can still, just as any other seller's disclosure, they can say, not to my knowledge, if they don't believe it, but they still have to sign the disclosure. And the agents are looking at the publicly disclosed information. So, yeah, Teresa.
Okay, so they can say not to their knowledge, but to protect us, yeah, I'm going to want them to sign a form that says I told them about it, even if it is a not to their knowledge, because yeah, the risk of them saying not to my knowledge, and I've populated the top of it, and that just seems very high for us.
Our clients, which is why I'm requesting for that buyer's disclosure that we need to have, because we can't make our sellers do anything. Either they're going to sign it or they're not.
Right, but I definitely want to say I told them about it. I don't want them going in court 5 years from now and saying, well, she might have mentioned it, but I don't know.
Right.
That's the chemo stone rule of follow it up, follow your conversation up with an email.
Well, and I think that is why they actually put it clearly in the part that the agents fill out, so that if the seller refuses or says not to my knowledge, that there's still disclosure to the buyer anyway. But that does not, the seller is still liable because it's law. So if they're not completing it as per the law, they are putting themselves at risk. And you know, we could put together disclosures and things that require them to sign. It's still fact.
We could also choose not to work with them if they're being ridiculous.
That's true. That's true. So I'm sure we'll have sellers that go, this was never disclosed to me when I purchased it 2 years ago. So why are you telling me about this now? And because it was not law until now, and now it is, and we're here to educate as best as possible, but you know, guide you to make sure you disclose appropriately and make good decisions. So I'm sure any buyer or seller can ask, won't this severely impact the value of my property? Oh, what's the answer to that?
Possibly.
Okay.
Anybody have what they would say if a buyer or seller asks them that?
I'm sorry, asks what?
Won't this severely impact the value of my property?
Oh, you mean they've already bought it?
They've either already bought it or they're in escrow.
That is a possibility.
Yep. And, you know, we can say, we don't know when, we don't know, you know.
We don't know anything. We're just
Well,
telling you what the possibilities are, I guess, right?
Right. And there could be a fire, and there could be a tsunami, and there could be a hurricane or hail rain, or
Exactly.
we don't control the elements, but yes, it is a perceived possibility that it could be an impact.
Yep. And how severe it is, well, it's not gonna, most likely it's not gonna happen overnight. So I think that one of the best discussions with clients is, well, how long did you plan on having this property and what is your intentions, in the use of it? Are you planning on turning it over to your grandchildren? Well, you might want to take something farther away. But if you just, it's an investment property, guess what? People still want to rent places on the beach in Hawaii. And as long as the beach is there, they will want to rent your place out, and it can be a good investment. And so I'm sure they will ask, what should my condo association be doing? We could have probably a whole new class on that, but it's not, our, other than basic guidance, which I put a few notes in my notes, that you make sure to review your association docs, you review what the association has done currently, what they have plans for, if they see any big assessments coming forward, if certain buildings are going to have to be torn down. That is all, and those will continue to change, and all scenarios that are happening today. So, I don't believe in these models. What can I do? And that's for them to take the models and use and or ignore. That's that disclosure that they have out there. So,
Kathy, reading through the information that HAR sent out, all the way through there, it is the seller's responsibility. It's great. We like to be full service. We certainly want to help them, especially if you're working with a buyer, making sure that they see this. But
right.
It's not our responsibility.
Exactly. And yeah, we can coach our clients around some risk mitigation, but those answers are really theirs to make. A buyer can ask, what should I be concerned with? Well, there's a lot of different things, and every different piece of land is slightly different. But again, it's theirs to investigate. This tool isn't exclusive to just agents. It can be used by anyone, and encourage them to go out and make their own evaluation. How frequently will this data change? I don't know. My guess is that it's going to change. How frequently? I don't know. I would just throw out, if you're working with a specific condo and it really well, that you at least go out and check every year to see if anything's changed annually. But I don't know. So agent questions. Should I make current owners aware of this disclosure? I think that the answer to that is, do you think your current owners would rather hear about this when they want to list their property, or want to hear about it now?
Hearing about it now may make them want to list their property.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yep. I was going to say, what could we all use right now? Yeah, and I mean, you've got, what is it? Kahana Sands, where a building's going to have to be torn down, and it's documented in the association notes. People are still buying there and paying good dollars. So Anyway, so I think, tracking what are the condos doing. We never advise as agents, we don't advise people to be on the board of directors for condos, but some are. But if you can connect with people that are to track what they're doing and how they're addressing these issues and what's coming down the road. And then just when you get those condo docs and you can see, check and see what they're doing proactively or what they're considering. So any other thoughts on that? We want to be a service to our clients. And we don't have all the answers, that's for sure.
I just want to say thank you, Kathy. This was great.
Yeah,
Well,
this is awesome. And I appreciate you taking the time to delve into it. It's not like it's light reading, and give us a cliff note that we can actually work off of
right.
to help. So thank you.
Yep. And like I say, it's going to change over time. I'm sure we'll get a little more guidance going forward, but this is what we know today. So, okay, with that, we'll wrap it up. You guys all have a great weekend. And thank you very much.